So I'm pleased to introduce Professor Marti Hearst from the UC Berkeley School of Information.
Okay. So today I'm going to talk about the middle distance in information visualization. Who here knows what the middle distance is? Anyone familiar with that term? Yeah, no one's raised their hand. It's kind of an archaic term, which is one reason I picked it. But if you look at this image, it's a pastoral painting, a photograph, and the idea of the middle distance is not the foreground and not the far distance or background, it's everything in between. And that's the notion. It's that stuff in the middle. So sometimes when it's talked about, here's a quote from a book that uses the term, "It sometimes becomes necessary in the formation of pictorial vistas to create the middle distance. Thus, in overlooking a valley, we get only the foreground and the far distance, and in the middle one must then immediately follow the first one." Now, I find that a little hard to understand, but this is writing from 1861. Actually, my student and I, my collaborators, are working with in the digital humanities. So that involves working with texts like these. And the middle distance, there's another image which makes use of the middle distance. The idea is that if you look in this image, there's a train in the foreground, there's mountains in the background, but in the middle distance, in the middle part of the image, there's interesting developments. There's some human habitation and so on. So why am I talking about the middle distance? Well, it's symbolic of a larger point, which is when we design information systems, or just think about systems generally, or just when we think about a lot of things in life, we tend to think about the endpoints in a crisp manner, but the stuff in the middle is mushy. And so when we're talking about the digital humanities, typically what's been done with literary analysis is something called the close read, the foreground, which is you read a text or a document in great detail, and that's the standard way that literature analysis is done, is looking in great detail to understand a text. But there's been a lot of upheaval in the humanities recently by something, the far distance of text analysis, what some people have called culturomics, and what those of us who are computer scientists who've been doing text analysis for a long time have called text mining and other things. And the close read, looking in detail at the text, the far read, the far distance, is computing statistics across a big text collection to find patterns. I'm kind of interested in the middle distance, or what we might call sense-making in the literature of analyzing information. So the close read, here's a definition. Close reading describes in literary criticism the careful, sustained interpretation of a brief passage of text. Such a reading places great emphasis on the particular over the general, paying close attention to individual words, syntax, and the order in which sentences and ideas unfold as they are read. And I like this example. There's a book called Power and Passion in Shakespeare's Pronouns, Interrogating You and Thou. And the author here tried to see if there was any systematic pattern in whether or not Shakespeare chooses you versus thou in all of his works. And what she concluded was she couldn't figure it out. She couldn't find a pattern, and this is from the very end of her book. I don't claim to have read the whole book. I skipped to the end. And she kind of said, oh, I found these subtleties. It can seem random, but I'm sure there's some pattern here. But she didn't have good tools to use. I think she was just taking notes. On the other hand, there was a big stir in the humanities and social science by this paper that was published in Science a couple years ago called Quantitative Analysis of Culture Using Millions of Digitized Books. This was done with the Google Books project and the Ngram viewer, for those of you who know about it, with a cast of thousands in the author list. People from different disciplines collaborated on this work. And when you look at how they define culturomics, or culturomics, depending on how you say it, their definition is kind of something narrower than digital humanities, because that includes archiving and OCR and so on, and something broader than corpus linguistics, because that's what some people have already been doing. That's my loose interpretation of their definition. But in this very high-impact paper, they had a whole bunch of graphs like this, which to those of us who've been doing text analysis for a long time look like text mining. But they have this great collection, which is all this text from books that Google has scanned. So they have plots of how many words occur in the collection in each year, and plots of the coverage of different dictionaries, how many words are in them. So some really basic numbers like this. Frequency of trendy words like netiquette and phytonutrient and so on, buckyball, and they plot them over time. And then they have comparisons like the British versus the US spelling of various words, regularity in how words are spelled in different across the years, snuck versus sneaked, so word change over time are things that you can look at with these collections, which is what lexicographers have been interested in for decades. And there's still more. So I'm showing you, these are visualizations of data extracted from this large book collection from 10,000 feet away. So this caused quite a stir in the humanities and a lot of controversy. Now here's my Culturomics example using the Google Ngrams viewer, which has been made available freely for anyone to use, where I compare the frequency of the term middle distance to middle ground. Middle ground is, of course, a very familiar word to all of us. And you could see that they were pretty close in the past, starting at 1800 and moving out to currently. And then middle ground sort of took over. And we just don't say middle distance very often. And when it is used in modern times, it's used as a kind of running speed or running distance. In fact, it's really hard to find middle distance used for anything other than in this running usage. So I want to give another example of endpoints versus the middle, and that's in chess. It's a metaphor of chess, where there's a lot of talk about the opening in chess and a lot of talk about the end game. But there is the middle game, and as far as I could tell, that's a technical term for what goes on between the opening and the end. I'm not a chess player, but it's in Wikipedia. Here's a picture of the middle game. So I went ahead and plotted this with the Ngram viewer, and so the blue line is chess opening, and the red line is chess endgame, which has gotten really popular lately, and there was no hits for chess middle game, and I tried it with and without the space, and maybe three-word terms don't work, but the point is, people aren't talking about the middle game in chess either. So I've been interested in this middle game problem for search, and work I did earlier on faceted navigation, which has become the standard for navigating websites, was on how do you handle the distance between when you first enter a query and search results in an understandable way. That mushy part, how do you make it crisper? And this is our old Flamenco interface, but I searched on middle distance on our collection of fine arts images from the San Francisco Fine Arts Museum, and actually we get some nice images there, including that Great West one that I showed earlier. So you can find it in this sort of collection. And so what we want to do is support literature analysis at the middle distance for humanities scholars, and that's a project that Aditi Muralidharam and I, in collaboration with Brian Wagner of the English department, are working on right now. So there's this term called sensemaking. It's not the best word, but that's the word. It's a term of art, which is how do people start with a vague information need and iteratively refine it by searching, reading, and analyzing in a loop and reach understanding. And this is a popular graph that's used to show that iterative process. So we want to support that mushy process in the middle. And so we have a project called WordSeer, which is sense-making for literature study, so trying to support that middle ground. So it uses visualizations, but rather than just that far off, far away kind of statistical visualization that I was showing from Culturomics, we're trying to support that middle ground and let people formulate hypotheses, create patterns, make sense of their data in between the close read and the far distance. So we do have a whole lot of visualizations. A lot of them are standards. We have tools to try to help people make sense of collections. So, for example, with the vocabulary problem, which words embody the concept of female beauty in Shakespeare, we can let you search on beauty, say. You can get back some results. So here's a kind of concordance tool that shows where beauty occurs in Shakespeare. And then you can find related words that are computed statistically and start to form your own groups that you might then want to use for further analysis. So as an analyst, as a humanities scholar, or maybe a social scientist, you start to build your own groups to then apply further. Make your own patterns that you can apply further and connect them to other things. So let's pick fair and sweet. And so now we can see what are the terms that modify sweet in this collection. And it's lady, queen, love, lord, and so on. And what are the terms that modify fair? And we see, again, lady, queen, sun, maid, heirs, eyes. So it's a lot of women and so on, not surprisingly, if you know Shakespeare. We also want to support collection and comparison. And so, for example, does the treatment of love vary between the comedies and the tragedies? They're not about love, they're about different things, or the comedies and the histories. So, so we can compare word usage, say, in the tragedies to the comedies. And here we're showing a variation of a word tree that shows, for love, the phrases that come before it and after it, so that the user can compare that. And similarly, we could show a heat map where the words in love occur in the different comedies and tragedies, so you can formulate hypotheses about that. So WordSeer was actually used in a Hamlet class. We didn't know this was going to happen. A professor in another university just took his poor students who didn't know what was happening to them and made them compare several tools. And they suddenly discovered that they thought they were going to be reading all semester, but they were using technology. And they did things like study how the relationship between Hamlet and his mother changed over the course of the play, how does Act 1 portray the character of Horatio, things like that. And then we actually used the tool ourselves, investigating language use around men and women, and somewhat accidentally replicated and extended previous findings that Shakespeare scholars had found on this subject and published a paper on that. So in summary, we suggest combining natural language processing, information visualization, and search user interface design to build sense-making tools to help scholars analyze literature. We want to support that middle game, and we want it's midway between the close read and the distant statistics, and it should help with hypothesis formulation, verification, and refinement. So thanks for listening.